Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If a Tiefling Were in One Piece? Your Dose of Apple wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Alright, new rule, Carrie says as she finishes wringing the last of the sea water from her hair. She glared at Zoro, who decided to push her into the ocean a second time when they gained some distance from Shell Town. He'd fished her out when seeing her lack of drowning, saying that maybe the first time was a fluke, and she just glowered at him. No more pushing Carrie off the boat. Third time's the charm. Zoro grins across from her. No. Carrie shouts, flicking her wrist to summon her quarterstaff. She takes aim at Zoro as threateningly as she can muster, which isn't that successful considering she looked like a drowned rat, and pressed the tip of the staff against his chest to keep them distant. She glowers at him with a hiss of, "Don't you dare." Any former attempt at pushing her overboard is abandoned in favor of Zoro staring at Carrie's summoned quarterstaff in bafflement. Damn, I don't think I'll ever get used to that. He pokes the quarterstaff that she'd summoned, as if expecting it to fade from existence with the gentle probe. When it continued to simply exist, Zoro shook his head. Fine, I admit defeat, you're a wizard or whatever. Warlock, damn it. Carrie sneers, pulling back her quarterstaff and dropping its presence by letting go. The staff promptly vanished in a burst of light, leaving Carrie slouched into the side of the dinghy. Her arms folded across her chest as she grumbles to herself about useless muscle heads. It was about then that Carrie was tackled by Luffy. The breath leaves her with a grunt as Luffy drapes across her lap like a needy cat. He smiles up at her like he hadn't just knocked the life out of her and asks happily, "What other cool tricks can you do?" Ignoring her likely future bruise, Carrie slouches back and sighs, "I know a couple spells, a fair amount of cantrips." Carrie said, "I can also do some basic telepathy." Teleha? Luffy asks, cocking his head to the side in curiosity. Figures, Carrie thought. She leaned forward over Luffy a little and said, "I can show you, but I need permission." "Show me," Luffy says with a big grin, excited beyond belief. Lips twitching in amusement, Carrie locks eyes with Luffy, feeling a familiar tingle in the back of her head that prompts her to reach out with her inner eye and hold. The minute the bond was linked, Luffy flinched, wincing at the, she assumes, ice pick headache he just felt. Then when that bond was locked and unmoving, she reached out and spoke. "How's this for telepathy?" Carrie thinks, smiling brightly when Luffy watches her sharply, eyes wide with surprise when seeing Carrie's unmoving lips. "Surprised yet? How are you doing that?" Luffy asks, eyes wide with awe. Zoro watches them both in confusion, eyes darting between the awed Luffy and the silent Carrie. "Do it again. Do it again." Luffy squeals, grabbing Carrie's shoulders and shaking her lightly. Carrie holds back a snort, smile growing wider. "You can communicate back if you'd like. Just think of something and I can hear you." Luffy blinks before his expression tightens up in concentration. Carrie was honestly surprised it wasn't an easy task and could only stare in bafflement as the only discernible thought that eventually came through was a muffled "meat." "Meat?" Carrie asks, bewildered and amused. This results in Luffy laughing in glee, clinging onto Carrie all too excitedly. Carrie grins down at her captain, who looks so utterly enthused by this discovery that he is kicking his feet in enthusiasm. "You heard me," Luffy says through his laughter, before then pausing and reeling around to face Zoro. "Zoro, you gotta try this." "I'm very lost," Zoro states. "Magic thing," Carrie explained. "Give me permission and I can show you if you'd like." Zoro blinks at both the captain and Warlock, sparing a glance around as if there was anything else to hold his attention. So he just shrugs and looks at the pair. Sure, why not? Might as well pass the time, right? Carrie smirks and reaches up to tap beneath her eye. "Lock eyes with me real quick." Zoro looks dubious at the order, but does as asked when Luffy insists for him to try. So he locks eyes with Carrie and waits. When the ice pick headache hits, he winces in alarm. "What the hell? What did you do?" "Oh, you can tell the bond's in place?" The swordsman's jaw nearly drops at the voice of Carrie heard clear as day in his head and the lack of mouth moving. Carrie just smiles coyly at him while he continues gaping. He points at her and demands, "What the hell did you just do?" "I made a telepathic link with you," Carrie's voice floats through his mind. She smiles, still not visibly talking, and rests her head on her fist. She watches Zoro amusedly. "I'm honestly surprised you felt the link connect. You can respond back if you'd like. Just think of something and I'll hear it." That makes something nervous churn in Zoro, as his fingers run over the grooves of his katanas. His jaw works a silent turn before he attempts, "This is weird." "There you go." Carrie grinned brightly at him, her tiny fangs on display. You got the hang of this quick. Congrats. Can you hear anything I think? Zoro thinks nervously, his expression growing darker, more anxious as he stares down Carrie. At his question, Carrie's expression sobers. She shakes her head. Although I admit I have a spell that enables me to search through one's mind, this isn't what that is. I wouldn't use that spell on you unless asked. As it were, this just enables me to psychically link us for short snippets of conversation. I just glean surface-level thoughts, nothing deeper. At the answer, Zoro's entire body wilts in relief. Okay, good. Alright, I'm tired of the mind talk. Luffy announces, breaking Carrie and Zoro's attention and instead looking to him. He smacks his hands on the deck and announces, I'm starving. Really? Zoro finally voices, a bit perturbed by the remnants of his psychic conversation. Well, why not see about getting us somewhere with food? I don't really know how to navigate. Luffy admits, rolling over to where he flops off of Carrie's lap and onto the dinghy itself. He stares at the sky for a while till noting the silence from his two crewmates. He picks at his nose and meets their staring head-on. What? You're the captain and you don't know how to navigate? Carrie barks, looking ready to strangle the boy. Zoro looks equally close to starting a mutiny. No, drifting has worked well for me so far. Luffy shrugs before sitting upright and pointing at Zoro. And what about you? Everyone knows your name out here, doesn't that mean you know how to get from place to place? First of all, I only ended up out here because I'm trying to find a pirate I need to defeat, Zoro answers, folding his arms over his chest with a frown. And afterwards I couldn't find my way back to my village. I started hunting pirates to earn money and the rest is history. You're telling me I agreed to join a crew where none of us can navigate for shit? Carrie whispers, looking horrified with herself. She pulls her hat down over her head, her horns awkwardly wrinkling the fabric. I'm starting to have some regrets. Oh, shut up, Zoro snaps at her. I don't see you doing anything to help. Hey, wise guy, Carrie snaps back. I don't even know where the hells I am. In case you forgot, I got spat out here by some wild magic and the rest is history. She throws up her hands, letting go of her hat and shooting the swordsman a baffled look. Your stars aren't even the same. Whatcha mean? Luffy asks, eyes sliding to Carrie. The anger she'd been spouting quickly vanished as Carrie faltered. Dropping her arms, Carrie looked away and muttered, I don't recognize your sky. Meaning I'm either in another plane, or a different universe altogether. Different universe? Both Zoro and Luffy intoned, their curiosity piqued. Already knowing where this was heading, Carrie folds her arms and dips her head down to explain, there are several planes of existence, and there are several multiverses to boot. We are, I assume, on your equivalent of the material plane. Reality or whatever you want to call it. She rolls her head to the side as she continues, stars are a big factor in mapping out planes, and your star systems sure don't look like mine. So I'm willing to bet whatever chaos magic jumped me ended up popping me out in your reality. Shrugging, Carrie just reclines back further into the dinghy, the rest is history. So that's why you aren't familiar with the Grand Line or the history here? Zoro hazarded a guess, to which Carrie nodded, glad to see he was following. If I had to guess. Luffy is making a face like he's deep in thought, his lips twitching downwards as whatever is on his mind seems to stump him. Carrie raises her chin a little. What are you thinking? Half of Carrie thinks that he's just gonna admit to being lost, but she is surprised to find that Luffy instead says, so you aren't from here? It's a bit basic if naive, but it does get the point across in a rather simple way. The question makes Carrie's lips twitch, amused if anything. Basically. But, Luffy trails, still making that contemplative expression. What about your home? Your family? Won't they miss you? While earnest, the question makes Carrie's expression go carefully blank. The reaction is quick, barely there, but Zoro and Luffy catch it. And just as quick as that blankness had settled, it was promptly swept away by a big goofy grin spreading across Carrie's face. Nah. Letting her head flop to the side, she smiles bright and sunny at them, as if that eerie neutrality hadn't been there seconds prior. I'm a free soul, honestly couldn't wait for the first sign of adventure to sweep me up. It's impressive with how honest her laugh sounds. Zoro is about to point out she hadn't actually answered the question, but Luffy quickly changes subject before the swordsman could say a word. Well, that's good. Luffy perks up smiling, looking for all the world like he was carefree, because I'm going to be the king of the pirates, and that means I'll be the freest man in the world. His words spark something in Carrie as her expression turns a little softer, a little more real. She cracks a crooked grin and asks, yeah? Then she laughs to herself, throwing her arms behind her head and leaning back into them. Then I'm glad I'm on your crew, Cap. Luffy just grins, making his odd shishishi laugh through his teeth. And Carrie can't help but smile at the twinkling sound. Even Zoro cracks a smile, feeling a little freer, a little calmer. Then, because apparently their captain wasn't odd enough, Luffy's expression immediately sobers in realization, a soft gasp coming to him. Right? He puts on this haughty posture that makes both swordsman and warlock stare at him in bewilderment. I hereby announce Zoro as my first mate and Carrie as my second. A beat. Yeah, alright. Zoro shrugs, draping his arms over the lip of the dinghy and leaning back. Unfortunately, Carrie doesn't have quite the same reaction. Her whole body spasms as she flounders forward. Her eyes are bugging out of her skull as she grasps at her captain and shouts, "What? No." She shakes the rubber boy around as if it might aid in her getting through to him. Why would you suggest that? Why wouldn't I? Luffy asks as while being tossed around. He lets himself bounce a while longer before Carrie has to stop to catch her breath. You're strong? I should have strong people being my first and second mate, shouldn't I? I mean, yeah, I guess. But I'm a glass cannon. I can set someone on their ass pretty well and good, but I'm not a fighter like Zoro or you. I'm just... You can literally fire weird beams from your hands. Zoro points out bluntly, making Carrie stammer. Well, yeah, sure, but that doesn't make me any stronger? Literally any warlock could do that. Carrie looks bewildered. You made a guy throw up. Luffy says. I don't see how that's a qualifying factor. Face it, Tails. Zoro yawns, closing his eyes and looking ready to doze at a moment's notice. Your second mate whether you like it or not. The sooner you accept it, the sooner you'll stop whining about it. I am not whining. Hey, is that a bird? Luffy cuts through the start of an argument. Both Zoro and Carrie pause in their bickering and glance up to where Luffy is pointing. There, just as he'd said, is the silhouette of a bird flapping in slow circles around their dinghy. Does it think we're dying? Carrie asks, expression twisting. I'm hungry. Luffy says. We're aware. Zoro and Carrie intone. Let's eat it. Luffy says, again as if this added something to their conversation. What? Carrie asks dumbly. How? Zoro says smartly. Carrie glares at him and Zoro grins back. I'm gonna catch it. Luffy announces, sitting up and reeling his arms back. How are you going to? Carrie starts, though stops when watching her captain's arms sling out and grab the sail with a physicality that should be impossible. The rubbery limbs pull taut, and it is by the time that Luffy's grin is near manic that Carrie realizes what he had planned. Wait? And then Luffy was launched right at the bird. What the hells? Carrie cries, looking alarmed at her captain's lack of forethought. She grasps at her hat and tugs the brim anxiously as she watches her captain's form grow smaller and smaller as it rapidly neared the bird. Not bad, Zoro hummed, shielding his eyes from the sun to squint up at their idiot of a captain. Carrie's tail anxiously swayed from side to side as she continued to just watch her captain. She waited for a sign of him to fall, but he wasn't. Zoro. He's not falling. The bird started flying away. And it was about then that first and second mate sprang into action. Carrie scrambled around to find a fitting spell to cast, cursing a long line of mixed swears, common and whatever other language she knew on hand, as she attempted to find oars. You idiot! Zoro cries, finding the oars first and immediately getting to work on rowing. The abrupt movement makes Carrie yelp and fall on her ass, hat awkwardly falling on her face. Zoro continues shouting in anger at their captain as he tries to follow. Shit. Carrie screams, hands flickering with varying spells as she tries to figure out if any of them would aid her in that moment. Alas, none would. Shit. Hey. A voice shouts through their chase, making Carrie and Zoro look aside hurriedly, seeing that they were apparently approaching three bodies in the water, floundering and struggling to stay afloat. Hey, wait. You have got to be kidding me. Carrie groans as she stares at the apparent shipwreck survivors. No stopping, just grab on and get on. Zoro shouts, continuing to row right at the people. Carrie braces herself on the boat as Zoro rows like a madman. And just as expected, Zoro crashes into them, but they are lucky enough to grab and sling themselves into the dinghy. They are panting and gagging up what water they'd accidentally swallowed, but they're alive. Carrie slumps back, ending up slouched between Zoro's legs as she rests her arms on both of his knees and exhales in relief. Zoro just sort of looks down at her with a raised brow. Cozy down there? Can it, Hilltop? Carrie grouches, not moving from her place despite the tease. She pushes her hat up a little and catches sight of the three people they just unintentionally saved from a watery grave. You managed to get in, good for you? What the hell was that? The leader of the band cries. The guy has a weird cap with a skull and crossbones on it, though with a poorly stitched red circle in the center. The leader is moving to get up, but stops upon spotting Carrie. His eyes widen and he points, with a sword clenched between his fist apparently, and shouts, "What the hell is that?" Carrie slumps into Zoro with a frustrated sound. Zoro frowns and spares a glance at Carrie, glancing up and saying, "She's Carrie." "That's not what I meant, asshole." Carrie gives an appreciative look to Zoro. "Stop the ship," the man says, apparently shaking off his former fear. He wields the sword threateningly as if he was some big shot. "We're pirates of Buggy the Clown and we're commandeering your ship." Zoro and Carrie share another long look. "You or me?" "Me, you keep rowing for now." "Huh. Don't ignore us." Carrie's eyes sparked as she twisted her wrist and a familiar quarterstaff fell into her palm. Zoro eyed it curiously as Carrie rose out from his lap and started approaching the three pirates, all of whom were absolutely quaking in their boots. A short beating later, Zoro and Carrie were sitting side by side on the other side of the dinghy, glaring down the three bloodied and bruised pirates, rowing in place of the swordsman. Carrie leaned into Zoro's side as she still kept the quarterstaff on hand in case she needed to beat some sense into them again. "I thought you said you could use a quarterstaff?" "I didn't say I was good at using one," Carrie said smartly, leaning onto Zoro's shoulder and glaring at the middle pirate who'd been the primary source of her beating. "But it sure gets the job done." "Is this how piñatas feel?" one of the pirates whispers, a distant look in his eyes. "When we get an opportunity," Zoro drawls, "I'm teaching you how to actually use that thing and not just beat the shit out of people with a stick." "It gets results, doesn't it?" Carrie points out smugly. "I think you traumatized them." Zoro pokes a hole in her point. His eyes darted to the pirates looking miserable and like they had a new healthy dose of PTSD, and he barked, "Oi!" The pirates flinched, looking at Zoro in fear. "How did you three end up out here?" "Our ship was stolen," the leader cried, beginning their sad tale of getting double-crossed by some random woman out on the seas. It was clear they were looking for some sympathy, but as it were both Zoro and Carrie were fresh out of that to give. She used the weather to her advantage? She must really know the seas. Zoro trailed, sounding vaguely odd. "Could make a great navigator, I bet." "Well, hopefully she doesn't end up robbing us," Carrie mutters, arms crossed with the quarterstaff awkwardly drawn across her lap. Then a thought comes to mind. "Who's Buggy?" "Buggy?" all three cry, sounding aghast. "He's only the most ferocious pirate in the East Blue. He ate a devil fruit." He whispers it like it's a secret. Carrie stares at them dumbly. "Our captain ate a devil fruit too. He isn't anything special." "That means you're nothing too," one of the pirates points out. Carrie raises her staff threateningly, waving it around and making the three squeak. "How many times do I need to say it? I didn't eat a damn devil fruit." "I can throw you into the ocean if that helps clear it up," Zoro offers. "I will throw you off this damn material plane if you suggest tossing me into the sea again," Carrie shouts, now raising and waving her staff at Zoro, who looks less than threatened by the display. Seeing as this was growing to be a lost cause, Carrie grumbles, vanishes the quarterstaff, and curls up on the bottom of the dinghy. "I'm taking a nap. Wake me when we get our captain back." "Are you rage napping?" Zoro asks, sounding as if he's fighting off laughter. "Shut up, asshole." "Hey, Hornhead, wake up, we're here." Carrie, dragging herself from the fulfilling nap she'd had where she'd imagined a world in which she wasn't a second mate, blearily opens her eyes, blinking past the searing sun with a whine. She rolls over and covers her head with her hat with a groan of "too bright." "Now is not the time for you to get lazy," Zoro grouches, grabbing Carrie around her waist and slinging her onto the docks. There is a loud screech at the manhandling, and the tumble that follows proves entertaining at the very least. Carrie, now wide awake, rubs her sore arm that had slammed into the docks and sat up with a glare. "What the hell's man? What was that?" "We're here to get Luffy and we don't have time for your moaning and groaning." Zoro stands on the docks, looking around with narrowed eyes. "Where is everyone?" "Captain Buggy may or may not have taken over this town," one of the pirates admitted, standing there and not mentioning the whole body tossing he'd just witnessed. Sighing, Zoro rests a hand on his sword. "All right, take me to your captain. Might as well see if he's seen Luffy." "Though I've barely been on this crew for a day," Carrie groans, standing up and stretching out her back, tail stretching with the gesture, until slumping and dragging behind her as they start walking. Something tells me this is going to be a common thing. Astute observation, second mate. Zoro quips. Shut up. I'm not the second mate. That's not what our captain seems to think. Ugh. Carrie throws up her arms and looks like she wants to strangle the swordsman. But she doesn't, because she's a good second mate like that. Listen, Zoro starts, you can moan and groan about this later, but for now how about we focus on finding our captain and making sure he hasn't killed himself by now or gotten eaten by birds. Grumbling, Carrie folds her arms like a petulant toddler. Fine. Eyeing the pirates who'd been quietly watching the bickering, Carrie raises her head and barks, where the hells is your captain anyway? Startling at the attention suddenly on them, the pirates flounder. I mean, clearing his throat and thereafter resetting what he'd been saying, the leader of the band says, he should be in the center of town. That's where he was last set up at least. Right, and how long till we get there? Zoro asks, a bored look on his face. Are you bored? One of the pirates asks, looking baffled. Are you serious? Man, now I'm hungry. Carrie whines again petulantly. Rolling his eyes, Zoro says, well, at least we're on an island. Means we can find food. Perking up, and her previous brooding now gone, Carrie smiles. True. Then, as if it weren't odd enough, there is a dull, echoing explosion, followed by what sounds like collapsing buildings. Carrie's expression went baffled. What was that? All three of the buggy pirates shared a long look. Buggy ball. They answered as one, which really didn't answer the question that Carrie had asked. How about we pick up the pace? Zoro suggests. A short jog later, and all five of them were scrambling towards the source of ruckus. Upon entering the area, there were a couple things apparent. Their captain was stuck in a cage with a cannon aimed right at him. There was a girl being ganged up on by several other pirates. There was a clown. Okay, the third could wait to be extrapolated on, but Carrie thought it was worth pointing out in the moment. Is that a clown? That's what caught your attention? Zoro yelled as he was charging forward towards the pirates, still mid-jump towards the woman. Carrie followed him quickly, a spell lighting up in her palm. Misty step. The feeling of swimming through the fabrics of reality is a familiar one, shadows and clouds of forms that had once been real around her eyes as in a blink it is clearing and she is now atop her captain's cage. You can teleport? Luffy cries beneath her, attempting to peek through the bars and up at Carrie, but it just results in her captain folding himself into an uncomfortable pretzel. Misty step. Carrie corrects, kneeling down atop the cage while summoning her quarterstaff again. She braced one hand atop the metal cage, her staff twisted in her hand. And how the hells did you end up in this mess? Clowns, Luffy said helpfully, which was in reality very unhelpful. He okay? Zoro calls from where he is surrounded by fallen pirates. Apparently he'd managed to block them all in time, sparing the girl. Yeah, just as dumb as I remember. Hey! Luffy cries, frustrated at the bullying. It was about then that the whispering and murmuring picked up, talking about the pirate hunter, who they were, and demons. Carrie rolls her eyes at the latter topic, relaxing her posture into a lazy kneel. But while she was starting to put her guard down, it went right back up upon spotting the billowing figure nearing Zoro. So, come to capture me, have you, pirate hunter? The looming form asks. Those days are behind me. Zoro answers back, just here to get my captain. Well, I'm interested in killing you. The figure grins from ear to ear, raising his head just enough for his face to meet the sun, and laughter explodes into the center yard. Any hope of threat the figure was looking to gain is immediately faltered as the man looks to the source. There atop the cage was the keeled-over form of Carrie, who was laughing her ass off. I didn't think, Carrie gasps. They meant a literal clown? She smacks her hands a few times into the metal as she struggles to get her breathing together. Hey! The captain, presumably Buggy, snaps. That's rude. Sorry? Carrie wheezes, wiping tears from her eyes. Sorry. Just took me a little off guard. You don't hear me making fun of you. Buggy points out, making a broad gesture to Carrie. What with the everything? Right, good point, Carrie sniffles, rubbing at her eyes. Thanks for that, by the way. Breath of fresh air to not have someone cry demon. Can we quit with the small talk and get back to the fighting? Zoro asks as he rushes Buggy before the captain is ready. His sword sliced through the clown, resulting in a comical separation in torso and waist. Zoro looks alarmed by how easy that was as he blinks. No, Carrie whined, draping forward miserably. Zoro, why'd you have to go and kill that guy? He was gonna kill our captain, idiot. Zoro barks back, looking beyond annoyed. But he was funny, Carrie continues to whine while Luffy peeks out between the bars, grinning from ear to ear. Well, that was easy. And if there was one law of the universe that Carrie knew by the book, it was that nothing ever came easy and you never voice it when it is. Eyes snapping wide and whole body going rigid, her head whips up and she boggles in alarm when watching Buggy still moving. Zoro! Look out! Too late, as she watches one of the arms that Zoro had swiped off levitate and stab Zoro. With a cut-off yell, Zoro slumps forward, hand moving to stem the blood that now poured out of his stab wound. Carrie's eyes widen in horror as she watches her crewmate kneel and grit his teeth, sparing a glare over his shoulder at the rising Buggy. The chop fruit. Buggy says by way of explanation. You can slice and dice me but you can't kill me. His limbs reattach with quiet clicks as if there were no wounds there to begin with. So he's immune to piercing and slashing attacks, maybe bludgeoning too. Carrie whispers, eyes wide with realization. Her shoulders hunch forward as she lets her quarterstaff vanish, figuring that it would do little use here. Instead, she lets herself kneel and allows familiar spells to come swarming to her palms. Let me handle him, Cap. Carrie says, eyes narrowed on the clown. Luffy peeks up at Carrie again, eyes searching, careful. But then his face splits into an easy grin. You got it. Then he pauses. Can I yell at him a little though? Rolling her eyes, Carrie looks down at Luffy with a no shit expression. Well, duh, you're the captain, you can do whatever you want. Oh, right? Clearing his threat, Luffy takes a great big inhale before shouting at the top of his lungs, stabbing someone in the back is fighting dirty. You got that, big nose? The shocked gasps that follow are comical at best. But it does the job as everyone nervously looks to their boss, whom of which stands there twitching like a funhouse ghoul. Buggy's eyes hone in on Luffy, still bound in his cage, and he charges. Who do you think you're calling Big Nose? Buggy screeches as he launches a knife-holding hand straight at Luffy. Though before the knife can make its mark, the hand abruptly drops. And so does the owner. Buggy clutches at his stomach and starts rolling around, howling with laughter, tears streaming down his face. He looks alarmed by his abrupt shift in demeanor, kicking his feet and cackling to the very sky. Hi chihaha, I is this, ha ha. Buggy struggles out, wincing past his cackling, tears still rolling down his face with his laughter. Everyone stared in bafflement at the display, unknowing as to what just happened. But Luffy, perhaps sensing the cause, just looks up at the form kneeled atop his cage. Carrie's golden eyes were sharp and unblinking as she stared down Buggy with a carefully neutral expression. The only hint as to what was happening was the faint dust coating her hands now floating away in the breeze. Luffy's eyes sparkled. But he knew that whatever this was likely wouldn't last long, at least not with the way Carrie was dead focused on Buggy, expression serious. So, he rolled his head to Zoro and cried, time to go. All right. Zoro sputtered, staring at Carrie before shaking his head and muttering, move it, Tails. Carrie made a throaty grunt as she shifted off the cage, still staring down Buggy the whole time. There was a brief moment where she spared a glance at Zoro and his still weeping wound, but her sights were back on Buggy the minute his laughter started to wane. When her attention was back on him, the laughter picked up again, and subsequently made the nearby pirates startle back. Whatever Carrie is doing, it won't last long. Luffy points out, his eyes darting to the orange-haired girl still staring at them in pure bafflement. Luffy blinked at her a few times before putting on his usual big grin and saying, oh, and this is our new navigator. Carrie and Zoro spun on a dime, yelling, our what? This had the unfortunate side effect of Carrie's concentration being broken, meaning that Buggy's laughter finally ended and the clown was left sputtering for air on the ground, gasping and clawing at his chest as he struggled to calm down. What the hell was that? Buggy gasps. All right, bozos, show's over. Carrie said, face paling. She turns to Zoro and says, do you have enough energy to haul yourself and Luffy out of here? Like a little stab wound is going to make me break. Zoro scoffs, giving a grunt that suggested otherwise as he lifted Luffy and cage over his head and onto his back. Grunting back, Carrie turns to their new navigator and asks, mind following them in case Sword Brain here keels over? I'm not gonna keel over, hornhead. Zoro shouted as he started his awkward shuffling to try and leave. Sure you're not, Carrie says disbelievingly. She looks imploringly at the other girl and says, I'm going to cause a distraction that'll give us some time to make a getaway. You make sure they get out while I make it, got it? I'm not a part of your crew. The girl grouches. Carrie wants to pull out her hair. I don't give a damn, just go with them. Whirling around on the Buggy pirates coming back to themselves, Carrie hops in place to try and get her blood pumping. Finally, sprinting forward with a swear as she slides down to the massive cannon that had just been facing her captain. "Oi clowns, get a load of this." She fits herself under the cannon and pushes. "She's trying to aim the cannon at us." One of the pirates shouts as the group falls into loud shouting and screaming. Buggy among the squealers. Unfortunately, that really couldn't happen until she could flip the cannon around and the thing was heavier than a house. "Why couldn't I be born a fighter?" Carrie muttered as she tried to gain some strength. Damn her lack of athletics. "Oh, screw this noise." Carrie finally shouted, giving in to the easier route and summoning a familiar red mass in her hand. She places her hand onto the metal exterior and feels the glow pulse. Eldritch blast. The force is just what she needs, likely aided by it being point blank, as she bares her teeth in a toothy grin and shakes out her tingling hand when the cannon slammed into place, now facing the enemy. This was, of course, followed by more squawking and screaming. "It's aimed right at us." "All right, Luck, don't fail me now." Carrie shouts as she looks at the tiny tether of rope sticking out of the end of the cannon. With a snap and a quick prestidigitation, the fuse was lit and going right in. The blast that followed could best be described as deafening. The screaming from the pirates was drowned out by the explosion the cannon caused, debris and smoke filling the small square and successfully giving a low temporary means for them to sneak by. Unfortunately, Carrie wasn't as fortunate to go unscathed, as being so close to the blast left a dull ringing in her ears, sound muffled. Wincing and rubbing at her ears, Carrie whined, "Man?" Though whining could come later, she reasoned, quickly slinking through the cloud of destruction. Eyes darting and honing in on every silhouette in the smoke she caught. She did well in avoiding them and was soon slipping out of the square and down the original path they'd taken to get there. As she looked at the countless streets and options as to where they could be, Carrie slouched forward and resented her life choices. Half an hour later, which might as well function as a short rest, and Carrie was drawn to commotion at long last. She thanked whatever deity had blessed her and turned to sprint, shouting, "I'm coming! I'm coming!" as she ran. Turning the corner, she gaped at the sight of demolished houses and crumpled buildings, all of which seemed to fold right under each other, resulting in a house of cards situation. Her guffawing was cut short by a muffled groan, and she turned her attention to the source and perked up. "Zoro?" Carrie called, trotting closer till she came to kneel by the swordsman's side. "That was not the wake-up call I was expecting." Zoro groaned, lifting his head from his hand to blink up at Carrie. "Oh, hey, Carrie." "Carrie." "Zoro?" Another voice called, causing both swordsman and warlock to lift their heads. Not too far was Luffy, a baffled alleged navigator with him, out of his cage and grinning like a fool. "You're alive. How could anyone possibly live through that?" Their navigator whispered. "Hey, you got bandaged," Carrie observes, carefully helping Zoro to his feet. "What happened while I was searching for you?" "Passed out after I got out of the square," Zoro admits while he carefully slips away from Carrie's support. He stretches and winces at the pain it causes, but otherwise holds his own. "Guess I got patched up." "Yeah. The old man fixed you up after you passed out from blood loss." Luffy grins. "Who?" Carrie asks intelligently before blinking and sparing a look to the silent presence of their navigator. "Also, what's your name?" Rolling her eyes, the girl greets, "Nami." Laughing, Luffy places his hands on his hips and cries, "This is gonna be so fun." Nami promptly whirls on her new captain and shouts, "This is no time for laughing. We're headed for the Grand Line. We'll steal that map back and then head there," Luffy declares, all confident swagger. Carrie leans close to Zoro. "Map? Your guess is as good as mine," Zoro says back. Then, as if this whole interaction already wasn't odd enough, Luffy spins towards Nami with a hand extended in invitation, "Join us." Carrie guffaws, "I thought you said she was our navigator." "I'm not gonna be a pirate." "See," Carrie says, gesturing frantically at Nami, "she isn't even on the same page. But I'll work with you for now." Carrie opens her mouth, likely to tack on more obvious points, but her tongue catches and she looks to Nami with wide eyes. "Pardon? Enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?" Nami reasons, raising her chin with feigned confidence after she'd slapped Luffy's hand. "And right now Buggy is that enemy." Carrie blinks owlishly before shrugging, "Fair enough." Adjusting the hat on her head, she gets a proper look at Nami before greeting, "I'm Carrie, and before you ask, I'm a tiefling and a warlock. I was just gonna move past that, but thanks for the answers." Nami turns to Zoro and boggles at the man untying the bandana from around his arm in favor of putting it on his head. "Wha? You're coming too? But you're still hurt." "Took a nap," Zoro said. Carrie nodded. A short rest really does wonders, doesn't it? Plus I got a score to settle. And that clown has it coming. What did I pull myself into? Nami groans, head falling into her hands. Carrie gives a sympathetic pat on the back, commiserating alongside her. Though Carrie would be a liar if she said that it wasn't fun. A quick jog after the old man that had apparently ran off without them, and a quick explanation from Nami that the guy was the mayor and looking to attain his honor or something, and soon the four of them were peeling into a fight. Buggy was now in the street and apparently strangling the, Carrie assumes, mayor with one of his floating arms. The clown was too busy gloating to realize that Luffy was rushing in, snatching the mayor in the hand. Guess who's back? Luffy shouted. You again? Buggy shouted, his eyes dancing frantically over the three others before settling on Carrie and paling. He points at her and shouts, don't you dare do what you did to me before. Carrie crouches low, cocky smirk on her face that makes the tips of her fangs gleam in the light. Don't tempt me now. This is my battle. The mayor cries because apparently the guy was a sucker for a beating. He reeled back on Buggy, this is my town and my people to protect. Don't you forget it? Any hope to continue monologuing was promptly put on hold by Luffy slamming the dude straight into the ground. Carrie stared in bewilderment and shared a look with Zoro while gesturing frantically towards their captain in a what the hell man gesture. Zoro just sort of shrugged. What the hell? Nami cried, finally getting her bearings back. He was in my way. Luffy said as if that explained his actions at all. Ah yeah, that's fair. Zoro nods, which is when Nami turns on him and shouted at him asking if he was a moron. Carrie looks vaguely miserable. Hey, big nose? Luffy shouts as if they weren't already in deep enough shit. We're gonna die. Carrie whimpers as they turn the cannon on them. We're gonna die and we're gonna die because our captain's stupid. Oh shut up, wise ass. Zoro snarks, grabbing Carrie and tugging her out of the way of the incoming buggy ball TM. It's Luffy, he must have something planned. You put too much faith in that walking disaster. Carrie gripes, though her eyes boggle when her captain inflates. Okay, I take it back, I guess he did have something planned. Told you so. Zoro smirked, watching the buggy ball TM slam into their captain and promptly ricochet right back to sender. Well hot damn, that's quite a move. That's satisfying. Carrie hums while watching the building the buggy pirates had been based on explode. Her hair whips back with the following shockwave, and she has to grab her hat to keep it from billowing away, similar to her captain. That makes things a little easier at least. What are you? Nami cries. No one bothers answering her, instead admiring the demolition the boy had just caused. Carrie crouched down to balance on the balls of her feet while she admired the explosion. Though the reverie is quickly gone when the smoke fades and they see their efforts weren't wholly successful. Ah, he's still standing? Carrie whines, slouching forward miserably. Gotta give him perks for creativity. Zoro hums when watching the man throw the men he'd been using as human shields down. Zoro squints at something that was being tossed at them. He grabs onto his swords and mutters, heads up. Huh. Carrie blinks and finds that Buggy threw one of his men. The guy made her give a double take. He looked like he was trying and failing to put on the semblance of an animal, but the confusion is quickly brushed aside by Luffy slamming into the man and shoving him away. Watch out. Zoro shouts, throwing himself in front of Luffy at the last minute and drawing his sword to block an attack from another man who'd come sprinting in. Zoro leers at the man, if it's a sword duel you want, then face me. His wound, though bandaged, begins to bleed through the stark white. Luffy gives Carrie a pleading look. Could you? Yeah, Carrie sighs, looking put upon. She looks at the man and calls, hey asshole. The guy looks at her with a sneer, though Carrie inhaled before blowing noxious yellow smoke from her mouth, instantly swarming the man's head and causing his eyes to water. A dry cough starts in his chest. What the hell was that? Nami cried, looking horrified as the guy collapsed, spitting up. Was that fire? Anyways, the guy sat there wheezing and hacking while they all stood around staring at him blankly. Hey, don't steal my fight. Zoro turns on Carrie with a snarl. You're still hurt and he'd have kicked your ass. Carrie shouts, looking appalled at being scolded for helping him. Shut up. Zoro complained, slamming the end of his hilt on the still wheezing guy, effectively knocking him out. I would have won and you know it. Gotta do everything myself, don't I? Buggy's voice cut through their bickering, and all attention quickly shifted to the clown sauntering in the street with knives clenched between his fingers. And you call yourselves pirates? That's right. Luffy called confidently. Now hand over the map of the Grand Line. Oh, is that what the map was? Carrie asked blithely, deciding to just forego standing and kneeling on the ground. She looks at the clown that still appeared uncomfortable with her staring. She sees Zoro beginning to raise his swords and she rolls her eyes, leans forward and snags the bottom of his pants. "Papa Squat Hilltop, you're bleeding?" "You're bleeding," Zoro says like it's some kind of insult, though he does as asked and settles down next to Carrie with a subdued grunt. "We're gonna sit this one out, Captain," Carrie calls, smiling at the boy. Luffy looks happy at that, throwing a thumbs up in their direction. "You got it. Don't ignore me," Buggy shouts petulantly, stomping his foot and throwing quite the impressive tantrum. "Do you want me to put you on your ass again?" Carrie snarks. Buggy points right at Carrie with narrowed eyes that radiate hate. "You," he seethes, finger just barely trembling from the force of his anger. "You can ignore me." He then swings his pointing to everyone else, but everyone else can't. "Got it?" Carrie calls, giving a thumbs up at the clown who just sputters an insult. It was about then that she realized another party member was missing. "Hey, where's Nami?" "How should I know?" Zoro grumbles, chin in his hand and slouching forward in annoyance. "I'm sitting this one out." "Quit being a baby," Carrie rolled her eyes, though rolls them towards the agitated swordsman. She reaches out for the bandaged wound and prods loosely around the blood seeping through the white. "Let me see the damage." "I'm fine," Zoro says, eyes catching on Luffy starting to reel up a hit to take out the clown. He hides a smirk as he watches the battle take place, though that smirk fades at Carrie's prodding. "Quit it. Take it off so I can see if you're about to keel over," Carrie orders, poking again and scowling when Zoro subsequently bats her hand away. She glares at the swordsman and hisses, "Don't make me put you on your ass." "I'm already on my ass, hornhead," Zoro points out, reveling in the way Carrie squirms in her stifled annoyance. Though Carrie doesn't put him on his ass, she does slap the back of his head. Zoro yelps at the gesture, recovering quickly to glare at her. "What the hell, Tails? Sue me for wanting to see the first mate safe." Carrie hisses, smugly peering at the swordsman when Zoro finally grumbled and started to carefully unwrap his bandages. Carrie, upon seeing the winces Zoro was trying his damnedest to hide, aids in the final stretch of unwrapping, much to the man's misery. By the time the final soiled bandage peeled away, still held onto so Carrie could rewrap it once satisfied, Carrie was tilting her head at the sight of the stab wound. She gently pulls the fabric back, pausing only once when Zoro grunts in discomfort and eyes the wound. Her eyes run over the injury, though just as she'd expected, the apparent stitches that Zoro had been given had torn through. As it were, half the wound was still sutured but the other half had broken. Frowning, Carrie mutters, "You'll need to be restitched once we're out of this mess." She rubs her fingers together thoughtfully, frowning at the wound for a few beats longer before sighing and letting her shoulders slouch forward. "I'm no cleric, but I think you're out of anything too dangerous unless you decide to push yourself." "Cleric?" Zoro asks, raising his arms to let Carrie rewrap his side. Carrie's hands pause for a moment in wrapping Zoro's wound. After a beat, she continues again, quiet as she explains, "Clerics are Her face squints in thought for a moment before she finally says, "I guess you could call them medics? They're another type of magic user, the one that, through gifting. Remember that?" Zoro grunts when Carrie finishes wrapping the bandages. Zoro calmly drops his arms, saying, "Yeah, the magic through gifting. What's that about?" "Traditionally, you join a church of some kind and you swear yourself to a deity. Or, I've also heard of cases where a deity chooses a person to be their champion or follower outside of the congregation itself." Carrie scratches behind her ear, absently cracking a grin when Luffy continues pummeling Buggy. "After swearing your allegiance or whatever, the deity gifts you with a modicum of their power and lets you pull magic from their domain." "What's that got to do with me being stabbed?" Zoro asks. "Although it's not the complete norm," Carrie drawls, "it's fairly common for clerics to be healers, being gifted healing magic and spells from their patrons. Again, not all clerics, but enough to where it became something of a running gag." "So you're telling me there are people where you're from that can just wave their fingers around, spit some hullabaloo, then just conveniently heal my stab wound? No medicine or medical jargon needed." Zoro blinks at her like he expects the tiefling to throw her hands up and cry, "Just kidding." Yet Carrie just nods. "Damn," Zoro mutters, "you sure lost the magic lottery." "Oh, shut up, jackass." Carrie slugs his arm, earning a mock cry from the swordsman. She sits there petulantly for a while longer, arms crossed and looking miserable before admitting, "You aren't entirely wrong though, what I wouldn't do for a healing spell or two. Unfortunately my asshole of a patron has an aesthetic it likes to keep to." Zoro looks like he wants to comment on that, but pauses at a scream that makes both tiefling and swordsman go on edge. Without further prompt needed, both whip their heads around to their captain. He's cradling his hat in his hands, which looked as if it had been thrown off in the duel. Luffy is grinding his teeth, looking beyond rage as he cries, "This is my treasure." He holds the hat impossibly gently, contrasting the bubbling rage. "I'll never forgive anyone who touches this hat." Both Carry and Zoro share a look at that, both subtly raising should their captain need them. Yet before they could make a single move, Buggy was throwing daggers faster than either could move. And both could only watch in horror at the poor time in which their captain moved and the hat at the end of 3 ill-timed daggers. It was as if time stood still. They watched their captain's panic take place, eyes wide with a terror unseen, only to be replaced with a rage fit for a devil, his eyes honing in as if it weren't bad enough, the hat was pulled out of their captain's hands and into the ill-suited hand of the clown. It seemed they hadn't realized there was a hand attached to the daggers. "Sad treasure," Buggy teased, eyeing the hat that was now in his possession. "What possible worth could this hold to a brat like you?" Luffy, Zoro starts, but their captain ignores them in favor of charging forward right at Buggy. "That's the hat I swore myself to with Shanks." Buggy cackles, throwing the hat down. "Shanks' hat? I thought it looked familiar." He spat on the hat, making Luffy further rage, and both Zoro and Carry seethe on their leader's behalf. "That red-haired ruffian and I used to be on the same pirate ship, comrades even. Shanks was a great man." Luffy cried, winding up for a hit, and by the looks of it he wasn't going to hold back. "Don't you dare compare yourself to him." Seeing that their tumble was growing closer to the downed hat with every step, Carry whispers, "Misty step." World warping and reality bending, then Carry's hand darts out in safe distance of the hat, grabbing and pulling it back into the safety of her arms and out of the subsequent scuffle that followed. Luffy seemed so in the throes of beating Buggy's ass that he didn't even notice Carry's appearance in rescuing the straw hat. She cradles his treasure close and overlooks the quality, wincing at the holes in the center and the little tears in the side. It was times like that in which she wished she had more useful spells. A simple mending would do wonders then. Yet all she could do was prestidigitate the dirt, grime, and spit off, at least leaving it cleaner than last addressed. She was gentle in handling the apparent treasure, overlooking the work to be assured that it was still recoverable. Seeing that it wasn't in permanent harm's way, her eyes dart up to where she spots Luffy pummeling the clown into the ground, who seems too scared stiff to pop into pieces. There is a familiar hum when staring that she latches onto, eyes sparking only once as she carries the gentle message across. "I have your hat and I've cleaned it to the best of my abilities. We can see about mending the tears when we are somewhere safer." It's honestly impressive that Luffy doesn't even flinch at the mental prod. Just pauses with a brief glance over his shoulder to confirm what he'd heard. When his eyes land on Carry, seeing just as he'd been described, he lets some of his hackles fall. Though by the way Luffy turns back on Buggy, anger and derision still at full front and center, it was clear that her reassurances weren't all that it would take to abate him. "Oh, what the hell?" Head whipping around, Carry stares at Nami, who'd conveniently shown up again. She was lugging a large sack in her arms, and by the sound of clinking and metal twanging, Carry was willing to bet that it was filled with some manner of loot. Carry gave her a baffled look, to which Nami returned, eyeing the hat in her arms with bewilderment. "Hey!" came a cry, making both girls turn their heads back around to see Buggy staring at Nami looked appalled. "Put my treasure down." "Ah shit," Nami muttered, looking like, "This might as well happen," was an expression. "Since when did you think you could fool me, girl?" Buggy crewed, snapping out of Luffy's hold to be quite literally all torso. He started charging Nami, flying. Carry was boggling because the dude could fly? With intent to kill. "I won't allow you to take a single coin of my, oh sweet maiden." The expression he made was of a particular sort. The sort that came from the greatest pain someone of his type could experience. Both Nami and Carry spared a look to where the clown's legs had remained. There they both witnessed Luffy giving what could only be defined as a kick to the nads right to said waist. This resulted in Buggy being temporarily down as he collapsed wheezing and groaning. Carry bursts out laughing without really thinking, feet kicking and tail whipping back and forth as she collapses onto her back, still being mindful of Luffy's treasure while she is busy losing her mind. Nearby, Zoro, still sitting, looks vaguely uncomfortable, wincing in sympathy. Nami just looks relieved that she wasn't going to get gutted. "Put that treasure down and stick with my second mate," Luffy declares suddenly, pointing at Carry, who had gone still at the mention of her alleged role in the crew. She sat rimrod straight so she could stare at her captain, She'll protect you, but the treasures are just going to get in the way. But it's my treasure. Nami whines, stomping her foot and looking for all the world disinterested as if she hadn't just been threatened for said treasure. I just got it. Ah, in that case just be careful then. Luffy nods seriously. I'm not your second mate. Carrie cries petulantly, only to look back at Nami and ease, though if you do need help I'm happy to aid. Respectfully, I am not taking you up on that offer. Nami says dryly. Carrie shrugs. Stop ignoring me. Buggy cries, finally recovering from his embarrassment, popping into several pieces and beginning a weird threatening display of floating around and just being a general nuisance. Though unfortunately as it were, he was a threat. And apparently Nami was the one his sights were set on as he started charging her full force. Though, as it were, Buggy had conveniently forgotten about the fourth party member that had gone unnoticed till then. In what could only be described as fighter's intuition, Zoro was sliding between Buggy and Nami, swords drawn and wound, weeping further at his forced movement. Carrie just scowled. Damn it, Hilltop, don't push yourself. Shut up and just focus on keeping Luffy's treasure safe. Zoro barked back, kicking at an approaching mass of flesh, which really what had Carrie's life become to where that was an acceptable thing to say. It was going to be a messy battle, that was for sure. Buggy was collapsing in a fit of laughter. Zoro and Nami looked at Carrie. Raising both hands, Carrie shook her head. Don't look at me, I ran out of mana. Their eyes went to Luffy, whom of which was apparently. Ah, Luffy really? Carrie winces, staring at the boy tickling the bottom of Buggy's foot. Go figure the guy was ticklish. Luffy's response is a big grin, which at least meant he was over his hat being muddled with. Seeing that it was opportunity enough, Nami opted to punt Buggy's head, still cackling on the ground, and right towards their captain. Finish him, Luffy. Nami declared, at least recognizing that the rubber boy would finish the job. Tossing the foot aside, Luffy grinned from ear to ear, shouting, remember who your real opponent is. The punch that Luffy gives is the purest form of satisfaction, all three onlookers grinning in pride. Then the three eye the remaining body pieces that had been conveniently left behind and share a long look with each other. Your hat. Carrie offers the hat to her captain after watching said captain punt the remaining pint-sized clown into the great beyond. She'd had a good laugh about the sight of Buggy, all feet and hands and nothing more and nothing less, and had almost forgotten the treasure her captain was waiting for. Watching Luffy observe his straw hat nervously, reaching out to gently take it, frowning at the trio of holes and tears in the straw, prompts Carrie into saying, I'm sorry I couldn't do more than clean off the grime. I can do my best in mending it, but truth be told, I'm not the best with a needle. Luffy continues to stare at his precious hat a little longer until his frown eases into something gentler, something more in line with the Luffy she'd first met, all smiles and kind poise. Without further ado, he pulled the hat over his head, smiling happily at it back in its rightful place. Carrie smiles right back. Then arms are wrapping around her and Carrie raises her own in alarm as Luffy hugs her tight. He holds her close, arms wrapping around her twice as he just smiles warmly and says, thank you for making sure it didn't get more hurt. Luffy squeezes once more, tight and warm, and something that makes Carrie squirm before letting go and laughing. He was pulled away by Nami, saying something that Carrie couldn't quite be bothered to let meet her ears. She just sorta continues to awkwardly stand there, hands still awkwardly hovering as she stares down at where her captain once was. Her fingers twitched absently. There is an odd fuzz in her head, words in her ears that whisper poison. Hey you there, Tails? Static recedes in favor of reality. Carrie's head turns without really thinking, meeting Zoro hovering beside her, one hand braced on his wound, the other resting on the hilt of his swords. He is staring at her with something not quite discernible, just a stare like he is trying to pick her apart. The longer she goes without answering, the more Zoro's lips twitch further downwards. Words bubble up quickly once she'd felt herself come back to her senses. Sorry, Carrie says first, because she always feels that she has to apologize first whenever she enters that sort of odd stupor. She blinks a few more times when her apology appears to make Zoro frown more. Were you asking about something? Zoro breathes, like he wishes to ask and dig further into whatever had drawn her into that odd sort of being, but his tongue catches. In favor of further prodding is instead a hiss, as Zoro staggers, hand pressing further into his wound. It's enough to get Carrie fully back to herself and moving. Idiot. You pulled the rest of your stitches out, didn't you? Carrie hisses, slipping beneath the swordsman and taking some of the weight off his side. Think you're finally taking it easy and you go and pull some shit like this. Shut up. Navigator was standing there about to get skewered. I couldn't leave her there. Zoro spits, letting himself sag a little with Carrie acting as his crutch. She doesn't even complain as she takes the added weight and helps Zoro stand tall. Carrie does a weird series of expressions that eventually settle on subdued as she grumbles, "I hate that you're right." This has the effect of making Zoro puff up his chest all proud like, "That's why I'm first mate." The jabbing into his wound is not kind. He turns to Carrie in offense, groaning, "What the hell was that for?" "You're being an ass." The tiefling grumbles. "Well, you're being, oh what the hell." Confused, Carrie looks to where Zoro was looking and looks bewildered at the random people coming out of the woodwork. They don't look like they're connected with the buggy pirates at the very least, but both still go carefully on guard. Carrie looks vaguely nervous, but sparks a tentative spell in her palm should they need to fight their way out of this. "I'm gonna be real with you," Zoro murmurs. "I don't know how I'm going to fare at running right now. I'll make sure you don't fall behind, don't worry." Carrie whispers back, bracing herself when the apparent townsfolk started crowding around the, "Oh damn, she forgot about the mayor." "Okay, we might make an early start at our getaway if that's good with you." "I'm not complaining," Zoro muttered back, watching as their captain admits to knocking out the mayor. "Okay, I think we need to make that getaway start now." "Agreed," Carrie said, turning on heel with Zoro in tow and beginning their hurried jog towards the docks. Not long later, having Luffy and Nami follow with distant shouting. "Why are they angry at us?" Luffy shouted, sounding incredibly confused as to how they ended up in this position. "We're pirates. I told them the truth." "Murder's illegal," Carrie chanted, to which Zoro eyed her pointedly. Her eyes caught on a small alley and she shouted, "Right?" She spun and ran straight in without another word, hearing the scrambling of Nami and Luffy following, and, was that a dog barking? Head reeling around for a quick glance, Carrie guffawed at the sight of a tiny dog barking down the chasing townsmen, looking bewildered at the small dog keeping them from following. Zoro looked equally as perplexed. Luffy just laughed with a thanks to a shoo-shoo that left both first and second mate befuddled. "What did I miss when I passed out?" Zoro asked, still running, though distracted from his pain at the odd situation in which they were in. "Your guess is as good as mine, man." A firm amount of running later and the four of them were at the docks. "Let's..." Carrie is panting, still stubbornly acting as a crutch for Zoro, but she's doing a poor job given her wheezing. "Let's not ever do that again. We're gonna work on your stamina." Zoro mutters as he hears Carrie continue to heave even as he does his best to not lean all his weight on her. He notes the way her limbs are practically shaking with the effort to keep both of them up, and his brows raise in judgment. "And your strength while we're at it." "Shut up, I'm a warlock, not a barbarian." Carrie inhales, only barely holding herself together. She squints at the ship both Luffy and Nami are investigating and can't help but ask, "Hey, aren't those the three guys we saved?" Zoro raises his head in the direction that Carrie is staring. He takes in the sight of the three pirates who set up shop atop Nami's apparent ship, a much larger ship by comparison to their sad dinghy. He squints at the three figures, acting all high and mighty to their two other companions, and Zoro hums, "So that's where they went." Apparently whatever front they were attempting to put on was interrupted by them catching sight of both Carrie and Zoro. One of the three nudged the ringleader's side, resulting in him pointing at the duo with a shaky finger. When all three were staring at Zoro and Carrie, both first and second mate put on their best smiles. The three quickly bolted, screaming. "Well, that was rude," Luffy said, looking confused at the idea of the three running away. Luffy, hand braced on his hat, turned to look at Zoro and Carrie. "What was with that?" "Carrie beat them with a stick," Zoro said bluntly, to which Carrie nodded. "Quarterstaff," Carrie corrects. "But yeah, I did." Luffy laughed while Nami just gave them an odd look as if she were convinced they were all crazy. Carrie sympathized with the thought. "All right, Hilltop," Carrie said, steeling herself and trudging towards their dinghy. "Let's sit your ass down and take a power nap for the foreseeable future." "Now that sounds like a plan I can get behind," Zoro muttered as he followed through, shuffling alongside the tiefling. It took a bit of teamwork, and with the aid of Luffy helping to transfer Zoro onto the dinghy without aggravating the already irritated wounds, they were all settled into their respective boats. Collapsing beside the first mate, Carrie dragged the brim of her hat down to cover her face as much as possible with a groan. Zoro spared her a side glance as he folded his arms behind his head and reclined against the side of their boat. "You know, I thought I was the one who was grievously injured today. But the way you're acting makes me think otherwise." "Shut up," Carrie whined, slapping at his arm lightly. "I'm tired and hungry. We didn't even get any food. I have some apples if you'd like." The trio raised their heads towards the other ship, where Nami was leaning against the railing, peering down at them curiously. Head cocked to the side. The crew had a barrel of them on board. Putting on a big cocky grin, she rests her head on her fist. Just fork over 1,000 berries. 1,000 berries? Zoro sputters, beyond alarmed. Carrie's face screws up in confusion. The hells do you want berries for? You already have apples. Yeah, and do you want, like, blueberries or strawberries? Luffy asks, beginning to untie the rope from the pole holding them to port. Carrie hummed and pointed at Luffy as if to say, yeah, what he said. The navigator just has the vague impression like she's starting to regret her life choices that had led her to that point. No, not fruit berries, are you serious? She looks at them like they're idiots. Zoro groans, running one hand down his face. No, we dash. He gives a muffled sigh and looks to Carrie, explaining. She means money. Oh, Carrie drawls, looking more understanding now. That makes more sense, Luffy says as he finishes untying the boat, beginning to push out from the dock with an oar. 1,000 berries for a couple apples is a scam. Zoro grumbles with a glare at the coy navigator. Nami just puts on a cocky smile and shrugs. No apples for you then. But I'm hungry. Carrie groaned, slouching into the dinghy and looking overall pathetic. She pouted for a moment, growing further from the docks while she continued wallowing. Until eventually she crooked her head up to meet Nami's attention again. Does it have to be berries? Nami, who'd been eyeing Luffy, let her gaze dart back to Carrie, eyebrows furrowing in confusion. What do you mean? Frowning, Carrie twisted just enough to drag the hat off her head. She looked inside before shoving her arm in, appearing to dig around. All three watched Carrie dig for a while, going up to her shoulder as she dug, resulting in quite the comical sight, before her expression lifts and she pulls her arm out, dragging a small satchel with her. She shoves the hat back on her head and begins parsing through the small bag without really minding the staring. I don't know how this translates to berries. Carrie draws, the clinking of coins sounding as she drags something into her hand. She turns to Nami and smiles at her, holding out her palm and revealing 3 golden coins. How's 3 gold pieces sound? 3 what? Zoro and Nami cry. Luffy just looks awed by the sight of real gold in Carrie's hands. Zoro looks beyond floored as he flips his attention between the gold pieces. The small satchel still sat in Carrie's lap, and the hat perched back on her head. Nami has stars in her eyes. Deal? Nami cries, leaning over to swipe the gold out from Carrie's palm and practically melting when she bites down on the gold pieces only to realize they were real. She giggles, jumping in place in excitement as she pockets the coins. You better give us the whole damn barrel for that. Zoro calls once, seeing Nami ducking away to go. Hopefully, bring the barrel. Zoro slouches back again, bracing on the rail as he stares at Carrie looking happy with herself. He further boggles when he watches her shove the tiny satchel back under her hat. Zoro snatches the hat off her head without thinking, resulting in a squawk of indignation. Peering into the hat, Zoro only notices an empty hat, and when looking at Carrie's head, he sees no comical bag sitting atop her scalp. Instead, he could only stare as his mouth opened and closed a few times, not even thinking to scold when Carrie snatches her hat back and tucks it back on her head with a huff. What the hell? Zoro muttered. Ask before grabbing, Carrie grouches, not really listening to the man's befuddlement. She rolls her eyes and just leans further back against the railing. Close your mouth before gnats fly in. Zoro doesn't quite do that, instead he manages to say, what the hell? As if Carrie hadn't heard it the first time. Giving the man a frustrated look, Carrie gripes. What? What is it? It's literally just a dash. Her tongue catches and her hackles fall as her eyes widen in realization. Right, no magic. Reaching up, Carrie pulls her hat off and showcases the inside to Zoro, who was now watching readily. Though before she could begin her explanation, Luffy was tackling Carrie's side. Just as suspected, their captain had seen her unintentional magic trick and was just as interested in knowing the explanation as Zoro. Smiling down at her curious captain, Carrie adjusted herself between Luffy and Zoro, showcasing the hat better for the pair of them. She pointed to the inner sweatband that was poorly stitched inside. Notice the weird stitching here on the sweatband? She pointed towards the odd embroidered runes along the fabric. These here are bag of holding runes. It means my hat doubles as just that. I can stuff whatever I want in this sucker and then it gets sent to a pocket dimension for safekeeping. That's so cool. Luffy says, eyes sparkling as he stuffs his hand in, only to grow annoyed when he hits the tip of the spiked hat. Why isn't it working? You need to picture what you're grabbing. Carrie explains. That or tear the sweatband runes. Which don't do that. Or else everything will come spilling out. and I'm really not in the mood to try a botched job at mending these runes. Breaking into a small smile, Carrie shifts the hat a little more towards Luffy. Try picturing that satchel you saw earlier and reach in. Luffy's eyes practically glow at the recommendation. He is about to do such but is broken away by Nami calling, not to break up the lesson. The three peer up to see the navigator looking down at them with a lazy smile, a barrel of apples beside her. But you ordered some apples. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.